Let's get straight to CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett, who joins us from the White House. And Major, what are you learning from your sources?
So this all occurred on the very first meeting between President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump here at the White House. Right after the election, the two had a longer than expected meeting, went about 90 minutes. Lots of things were discussed, but among the things that President Obama advised the new president-elect on was personnel. And I'm told by three people familiar with this conversation, I don't have direct quotes, but I do have the gist of this portion of that conversation. And the gist was this. President Obama said to President-elect Trump, look, you're going to get a lot of advice from people about who you should have on your senior leadership team. A lot of that advice will be for motives that are maybe not aligned with yours. My advice to you as president is hire the people you want to hire. Hire the people you are comfortable with. Hire the people you trust. Don't be talked into personnel moves you disagree with. President-elect Trump, I'm told, took that advice on board, thought it was very generous, and thought it was helpful. At this point in the conversation, or about this point in the conversation, I'm told, President Obama said, but I do have one specific recommendation. Stay away from Michael Flynn. He's bad news. Those are not direct quotes, but that is the gist of the conversation as communicated to me by those familiar with it from President Obama to President-elect Trump. That was the only person, I'm told, President Obama singled out as an exception to this rule, meaning the rule he had just given the president-elect, hire who you want, hire whom you trust. Now, how did the president-elect interpret this? Well, there was a conversation with his senior advisors. Is this really good advice? Or does this fall into the category that President Obama just warned him about, people trying to talk him into something for motives that he can't really detect? They did not know what to make of it. And clearly, on the campaign, Donald Trump was not only familiar with, but comfortable with Michael Flynn. And there was an entire orientation during the transition that continued after this conversation to give Michael Flynn not only visibility, but the authority to make calls on behalf of this incoming administration during the transition as the likely national security advisor, something he ended up being. So this advice was given. It was not heeded by President-elect Trump, and the consequences have been visible for the entire world to see. Michael Flynn's tenure as National Security Advisor, 24 days, the shortest in American history.
So, Major, the timing is particularly interesting because now we know that former Attorney General Sally Yates will be testifying in front of a Senate committee. And at least what we're hearing is that she will most likely be testifying that she also warned the Trump administration that Michael Flynn was not a good person to keep on board.
Right. And this all falls into the category of, wait a minute, you're a political rival of mine. You're from the opposition party. And the run-ins between the Obama administration and Michael Flynn were well established. Michael Flynn was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, removed from that position because of disagreements with the Obama administration, because in Michael Flynn's point of view, or from Michael Flynn's point of view, the administration was not taking the threat of ISIS seriously enough. Its counterterrorism operations were not nearly aggressive enough. And knowing that, the Trump campaign embraced Michael Flynn first as a surrogate, then as an advisor. So President-elect Trump and his team did not know what to make of this. If this was genuine and useful advice from the president, or political interference, or some advice that sort of masqueraded as genuine, masqueraded as potentially helpful, but might have been one designed to eliminate someone who would have been a stronger voice than maybe the president was comfortable with. The Trump team just did not know what to do with this. It turns out, in retrospect, that President Obama was onto something, and that he was telling them, meaning President-elect Trump, something that might have proved useful. But in politics, sometimes, maybe oftentimes, motives are not always clear, and loyalties run much stronger on one side of the political aisle than the other. And when you get advice, as well-intentioned as it might be, and as accurate in the retrospect as it might be, you can't always, or are sometimes reluctant to take it.
Major, let me ask you about a tweet that the president sent out earlier this morning. I'm going to quote it here. General Flynn was given the highest security clearance by the Obama administration, but the fake news seldom likes talking about that. Since we are not fake news, Major Garrett, let's talk about it. What is the president suggesting, and how does it play into what we expect to hear today from Sally Yates?
The president is stating a fact. Security clearance for Michael Flynn was provided by the Obama administration. That's a fact. It is, in some respects, a relevant fact, but it is not the only relevant fact. And what we here at the White House, those of us who are reporters covering this building, have consistently asked the administration is, did you not feel any burden during the transition to vet Michael Flynn's activities, his phone conversations, his previous travel, anything on your own, independently of the security clearance provided by the Obama administration? Didn't you have, during the Trump transition, an obligation to know more about Michael Flynn, learn more about Michael Flynn, and grow more comfortable with his actions on behalf of this incoming administration? And the White House response has consistently been, well, we have no responsibility over that. All we know is the Obama administration provided him security clearance, as if that's the only question to ask of somebody who's going to become the president's national security advisor. That is not the typical approach previous administrations have taken. And now that the Michael Flynn episode has blown up so conspicuously, and did blow up so conspicuously in the face of this White House, all it wants to say on the matter is, well, he had security clearance, end of story. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story is, what did you know about Michael Flynn, and when did it first become disturbing enough to you to decide to fire him? And what is all the processes in between bringing him into the transition, making him national security advisor, allowing him to call and visit with ambassadors and those representing other countries during the transition? What about all of that? Aren't you the custodian of what he did, what he said, and how he represented your incoming administration? From the White House perspective, the simple answer to that is no. And until, or unless, a Senate or House committee forces that information out of the administration, it's going to, by all accounts visible here, stick to that line of argumentation.
Yeah, Major, another part to that story, too, is that though the Obama administration vetted him for that security clearance, that administration also fired him.
Yes, as I said earlier, fired him over a disagreement about his management style of Defense Intelligence Agency and a philosophical disagreement about how to wage. From Michael Flynn's point of view, the administration wasn't nearly aggressive enough. From the administration's point of view, Michael Flynn was driving a much harder approach to succeeding on the counterterrorism front than the president and those closest to him were comfortable with. And what happens when there's a philosophical disagreement and a disagreement over management style? You work for the president, guess what? You get fired. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So a security clearance provided by an administration is as I said, relevant part of the story, but it is not the only part of the story. And what this White House has tried to do is suggest that it is all that you need to know, where in fact, much more needs to be known about what this transition team, as it approached the White House, did or did not scrutinize about Michael Flynn's activities. And as we've learned, had it done so, he might not have been National Security Advisor in the first place, and he might have been fired even sooner than he was. In the main, what we do know is Michael Flynn did not serve this transition well, he did not serve the administration well, and there was much less known about his conduct and his activities than should have been.
Major Garrett, thank you very much.
Sure.